Welcome to another deep dive. Ever think about how tiny changes, like the ones we barely notice, could actually lead to big results?
It's a fascinating concept.
Totally. And it's the whole idea behind Atomic Habits, the book by James Clear that we're diving into today. It's all about how habits work, how they're formed, and how we can make them work for us.
It's interesting how Clear uses his personal story in the book. It really grabs you right from the start.
Oh, absolutely. He starts off with this crazy story about a baseball accident he had back in high school.
And it was a bad one, too.
It was more than just your average teenage drama. This accident left him with some seriously intense injuries. Broken nose, facial fractures, even a detached retina and a bulging eye.
Wow. Yeah, that's rough.
Can you imagine having to relearn basic things like walking? I mean, that was his reality.
It's pretty incredible that he made a full recovery.
It is.
I think it's really cool how he turned that experience into a powerful example of human potential.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, he couldn't just wish himself better, you know? Right.
His recovery was all about these little wins, day after day, just pushing forward bit by bit.
And that's where the atomic part comes in.
Right.
It wasn't one big dramatic effort. It was those tiny, almost invisible actions done over and over that added up to real change.
Exactly. It's those consistent efforts, even when you don't see immediate results, that really set the stage for transformation. Like, imagine an ice cube melting.
Okay.
It takes a lot of energy to get to the point where it actually melts, and for a while, it seems like nothing's happening at all.
It's like that moment right before the breakthrough.
Exactly. And then, boom, visible change. Habits are kind of like that.
I like that analogy. It's a good reminder to be patient and persistent, especially when you don't see those results right away.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting how Clear's own journey as a writer kind of mirrors this whole idea of tiny changes leading to big outcomes. Back in 2012, he started a blog. Simple as that.
It's just right. Yeah. Committed to putting out 2 articles every week about habits and personal experiments he was doing. No big launch, no fancy marketing, just steady effort.
Just consistently showing up.
And that's where it gets really interesting. This simple writing habit, something so easy to dismiss at the time, it just snowballed. His email list just blew up, he started getting invites to speak, and boom, book deal. It's like a textbook case of how those small, seemingly insignificant actions can really compound over time.
Wow. Okay, so we've got this foundation now. Tiny changes, big results. But let's get into the science of it all. What's the core message of Atomic Habits?
Well, the book really digs into the how and why of habits, and it gives us this practical framework for getting better, for making positive change. It's not just about setting big goals, it's about building systems that help you take consistent action.
So it's more about the process than the destination. I like that.
Precisely. And that's where the idea of the plateau of latent potential comes in.
Oh yeah, I remember that phrase standing out to me when I was reading the book. What does it mean again?
It's this idea that we don't see the impact of our efforts right away, even though there's a lot happening beneath the surface.
It's like we're building something big but can't see it yet.
Right. Think about geological formations. It takes immense pressure and time for mountains and valleys to form. It's the same with our habits. Those consistent actions, they're building momentum. And then, bam, we break through to a whole new level.
It's a good reminder not to get discouraged when success doesn't happen overnight. But, okay, hold on a sec. What's so bad about focusing on goals? Isn't that what's supposed to motivate us?
Well, that's what we're often told, but Clear makes a pretty compelling argument that fixating on goals can actually backfire.
Oh, really? Tell me more about that.
Well, first of all, winners and losers can have the exact same goals. What sets them apart? Their systems, the daily habits and routines they've built to reach those goals. Then there's the problem that goals are all about the outcome, while systems are about continuous improvement. It's the system that keeps you moving forward, not the goal itself.
So the goal is like a destination, but the system is the vehicle that gets you there.
Exactly. And lastly, reaching a goal often gives us only temporary happiness. We check it off the list, but then it's like, okay, what's next?
It's like that feeling when you buy something new and you're super excited about it for a few days, and then it just becomes part of your routine.
Yeah, it's this constant chase for the next achievement, the next goal. It can be exhausting, really.
I definitely feel that. I've fallen into that goals trap so many times, telling myself I'll be happy once I insert any goal here. But that happiness never lasts, and then it's on to the next thing. It's a never-ending cycle.
And that's why Clear's all about shifting our focus from goals to systems. It's about finding fulfillment in the process, the actions we take each day, rather than constantly chasing some distant outcome.
So if we're not supposed to get caught up in goals, what should we be focusing on? What's the alternative?
Clear suggests something really interesting. He calls them identity-based habits. The idea is that our actions are a reflection of who we believe we are, whether we realize it or not.
So our habits are like little windows into our self-image.
Exactly. And he illustrates this with a funny story in the book. It's about this woman who used to be a kindergarten teacher.
Okay.
So even after she switched to a corporate job, she just couldn't help herself. She kept reminding her adult coworkers to wash their hands.
Like they were her little students. That's hilarious.
I know, right? It's such a good example of how deeply ingrained our habits are. They don't just shape what we do, they shape who we are.
So instead of saying, I want to write a book, I should say, I am a writer.
Exactly. That subtle shift in self-perception can make a world of difference.
It's about aligning your actions with your desired identity.
Precisely. And what's super cool is this works both ways. Our habits shape who we are, but who we believe we are also shapes our habits. It's this awesome feedback loop.
Okay, this is all making sense. So we've got the foundation now. Small changes,
Yeah.
systems over goals, and the power of identity.
Yeah.
But how do we actually put all of this into practice? How do we build better habits that actually last?
That's where Clear's 4 laws of behavior change come in. They're incredibly useful. He says to build a better habit, we need to make it obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying.
Got it. Obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. Sounds simple enough, but I'm guessing there's more to it than just remembering those 4 words.
Oh, definitely. And we can dive into each of those laws and all the cool strategies that go along with them.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Let's start with make it obvious. What's that all about? Is it about awareness, like being more mindful of our habits?
You got it. The first step to changing a habit is knowing it exists, right? So Clear introduces this tool called the Habits Scorecard.
Habits scorecard. Okay.
It's basically just a list of all your daily habits, the good, the bad, and the in-between. Helps you bring those unconscious patterns to light so you can start making more intentional choices.
That makes sense. I like that. It's like taking inventory of your habits. He also mentions this interesting example of Japanese train conductors who practice something called pointing and calling while they work.
Oh yeah, that's a great example. So they point at each signal and call out its status, and it forces them to be way more present and aware.
Interesting. So it's like a technique to minimize errors.
It is. Reduces errors dramatically. It's
Right.
all about being intentional and bringing your full attention to even the most routine actions.
So how can we bring that kind of awareness to our everyday lives? It's not like we're all out there operating trains.
Well, for that, Clear suggests something called implementation intentions, which is really just a fancy way of saying make a plan.
Okay.
So instead of vaguely telling yourself, oh, I should meditate more, you get specific, like I will meditate for 5 minutes at 7 a.m. in my living room.
Makes sense.
Having a clear plan makes it way more likely you'll follow through.
Oh, absolutely. It's much more actionable that way. Now, I remember Clear also talks about habit stacking. What's that all about?
That's a great one. It's all about connecting a new habit to one you're already doing, kind of piggybacking on an existing routine. So you could say, after I pour my morning coffee, I'll meditate for 5 minutes.
Right. So you're using that existing habit, the coffee routine, as a trigger for the new one.
Exactly. And that makes it way more likely to stick because you're not trying to create this whole new routine from scratch.
I like that. Okay, so we've covered make it obvious and all those strategies, but how about the next law? Make it attractive. How do we make those good habits, the ones that are good for us, how do we make them more appealing, especially when they don't always feel, super fun at the moment?
Well, that's where social influence comes in. Clear explains how we're wired to copy the habits of our tribe, the people we hang out with.
Makes sense.
You want to fit in, feel accepted. It's part of being human, right?
Totally. We see this all the time, from fashion to social media trends. We're always being influenced by what the people around us are doing.
Exactly. Didn't he use the example of the Polgar sisters in the book?
Oh yeah, the chess prodigies.
Yes. A big reason they became so good was because their dad was obsessed with chess, right? So from a young age, he created this whole environment where chess wasn't just a game, it was the norm.
So they were constantly surrounded by it.
Yeah, books, conversations, images, all about chess. So it became a part of their identity, which made it super attractive to them.
So to make a habit more appealing, we should hang out with people who already have that habit.
Well, that's definitely part of it. Surround yourself with the right people. But we can also be more strategic about our environment and how we frame things in our minds.
Okay, so it's about our mindset too.
Clear says we can make any habit more appealing just by reframing how we think about it. Like, instead of dreading exercise, you can choose to see it as a way to relieve stress, boost your energy, and feel happier.
I love that. It's about focusing on the positive aspects of the habit.
Exactly. Sometimes it's as simple as changing the words we use. Instead of saying, ugh, have to go to the gym, you might say, I get to move my body today and get stronger. It's a subtle shift, but it can change how you feel about the activity.
I like that. Okay, so we've covered make it obvious and make it attractive, and now I think it's time to tackle make it easy. Because honestly, getting started is often the toughest part.
Absolutely. That's where the 2-minute rule comes in. It's crazy how simple it is, but it really works. The idea is that when you're starting a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do.
So instead of aiming for a marathon on day one, I just focus on putting on my running shoes. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. It's all about removing any obstacles and making that first step so easy you can't talk yourself out of it.
Right. No excuses.
And then the cool thing is once you get started, it's way easier to keep going. Read one page, turns into read a chapter, and do 10 push-ups, turns into a full workout.
It's like you trick your brain into taking that first step, knowing that momentum will take over. It's so much easier to roll downhill than it is to climb uphill.
I like that. Okay, so we've talked about making habits obvious, attractive, and easy, which brings us to the final law, make it satisfying. Because let's be real, if it doesn't feel good, we're not going to keep doing it.
That's the truth.
So this last law is all about making our habits enjoyable and rewarding. It's about working with our brains, not against them.
I hear you, but our brains are wired to want instant gratification, right? It's hard to choose long-term rewards over those immediate pleasures.
True, but there are ways to work around that. Clear highlights the importance of habit tracking.
Oh, like those habit tracker apps or those little grids you see on social media where people check off their daily habits?
Exactly. It might seem basic, but it's surprisingly powerful. First, it makes the habit obvious you're constantly reminded of your commitment.
You're literally seeing it every day.
Right. Then it shows you your progress, and that can be really motivating. And finally, it taps into that satisfaction we get from seeing our efforts pay off.
I'm a big fan of those visual reminders. It's like a physical representation of your dedication, and it feels so good to check those boxes as you go. It's encouraging.
Absolutely. I think Clear also talks about accountability partners in this section, right?
Yeah, he does. Having someone to share your journey with, someone who keeps you accountable, can make a huge difference.
It creates that extra layer of motivation, you know?
It's like having a workout buddy or a writing partner. It's not just about the support, it's about knowing someone else is invested in your success.
Totally. It taps into our human need for connection, so the habit feels more satisfying because you're not just doing it for yourself, you're doing it for them too. Now, along with these 4 laws, Clear also talks about the Goldilocks rule.
Okay, let's talk about that. I know the fairy tale, but how does it apply to habits?
It's a really good analogy. The Goldilocks rule basically says that we're most motivated when we're working on things that are right on the edge of our current abilities. Not too hard, not too easy, just right.
So it's about finding that perfect balance, like that sweet spot where you're challenged but not overwhelmed, engaged but not frustrated.
Exactly. Think about it. If something is too easy, we get bored.
Right.
If it's too hard, we give up.
Sure.
But when it's in that Goldilocks zone, we're in the flow, we're learning, we're growing, and we're actually enjoying ourselves.
He gives a great example from an elite weightlifting coach in the book. I love that part.
Oh yeah, the one who said that the real key to success is being able to handle the boredom of training day after day, doing the same lifts over and over again.
That's the one. I think it's a really important point because it challenges this idea that success is all about passion and excitement and, always feeling motivated. This coach is saying, no, mastery often comes from embracing the monotony, finding joy in the repetition, and just showing up consistently, even when you don't feel like it.
That's so powerful. It's about falling in love with the process, not just the outcome.
So true. But how do we stay motivated when things inevitably get a little boring?
Clear's point is that boredom is actually a signal that you're getting better. It means you've mastered the basics and you're ready for a new challenge. So the Goldilocks rule is all about constantly pushing yourself a little bit further each time.
So you add a little more weight, run a little faster, tackle a slightly more complex problem.
Got it.
Got it. It's not about staying comfortable. It's about expanding your comfort zone.
Exactly. And it keeps things interesting, always learning and growing without getting burned out.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we're building these atomic habits. We're finding that Goldilocks zone. But how do we make sure we're actually on the right track? How do we avoid getting off course?
That's where reflection and review are super important. Clear talks about how consistently reflecting on your habits and making those little tweaks along the way is essential.
So it's not about setting it and forgetting it.
Right, it's about paying attention to what's working, what's not, and being flexible.
Always be willing to adjust.
Exactly. Even tiny improvements make a big difference over time. Think of it like compound interest. It's those small changes that really add up.
That reminds me of that quote. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. If something's not working, you have to be willing to change it up. We've talked a lot about building good habits, but what about breaking bad ones? What are some strategies for ditching those negative patterns that we can't seem to shake?
Yeah, breaking bad habits can be tough, but Clear gives us some really helpful strategies. The main idea is to flip those four laws on their head. So instead of making a habit obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying, you do the opposite.
You make it invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying.
You got it.
So like if I'm trying to stop snacking late at night, I would hide the snacks, remind myself why it's not good for me, make them hard to get to, and find something else to do that's more satisfying, like having a cup of tea.
Perfect. You're basically creating friction, making it harder to do that bad habit. And over time, it becomes less appealing.
I see you're making it less automatic. Speaking of environment, I know Clear emphasizes that a lot, right?
Oh, yeah. He's a big believer in the power of our environment. It really does shape our habits, both the good and the bad.
Like we're bombarded with temptations all day long, right? Notifications, ads, you name it.
It's everywhere. All those cues trigger cravings, making it way harder to resist those bad habits. So his argument is if we can redesign our environment, we can make it easier to stick with the good stuff and avoid the bad stuff.
So if I'm trying to cut down on screen time, I should put my phone in another room or at least turn off the notifications. Make those distractions less accessible, and I won't be as tempted.
Exactly. It's all about being proactive and setting yourself up for success by removing those triggers and temptations.
It's like building a fortress of good habits and making it really hard for those bad habits to sneak in. I like that.
And this applies to everything, from our homes to our workplaces to the people we surround ourselves with.
So true. It's about creating spaces and relationships that support the habits we want to cultivate. It's not just those big life-changing choices either, right?
No, not at all.
It's those little everyday decisions that really add up over time.
Those are the ones that matter. Like, are you grabbing a soda or a glass of water?
Yeah.
Are you hitting snooze or going for a run?
Are you scrolling through social media or picking up a book?
It's those choices that shape the person you're becoming.
You know, Clear uses this great analogy of a plane taking off. He says if you just slightly change course by a few degrees at the start, you'll be hundreds of miles off course by the time you reach your destination.
Oh, I like that.
And those little choices we make, they're like those tiny shifts in direction, right?
Yeah, like mini course corrections.
They seem so insignificant at the time, but over time, they really determine where we end up.
Absolutely. It's like those decisive moments, every little choice matters.
And just like a pilot uses instruments to navigate, we can use these tools and strategies to guide our choices.
We have to be intentional about it.
Clear talks about priming our environment, setting ourselves up for success. So if I want to eat healthier, I need to get rid of all the junk food in my house.
Make it easier to make good choices.
Yeah, make those healthy options the most visible and accessible. It's like if I want to read more, I should put a book on my nightstand instead of my phone.
So you're less tempted to scroll.
Exactly. And it's not even about willpower at that point.
It's about being strategic.
It's about removing those temptations and making it easier to make the right choices. Clear takes it even further, though, right?
He just says.
He talks about ritualizing our habits, making them so ingrained that they just become automatic. I think he uses that example of John Patterson, the guy who invented the cash register.
Oh, right, because back then, employees could just steal money from the register because there was no way to track sales.
Exactly.
So the cash register totally changed the game.
And it created a ritual.
Yeah, every sale had to be rung up. It made it way harder to steal, and it also made the whole process more efficient and reliable. It's kind of amazing how that one invention changed the entire retail landscape.
Wow. Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
So we can create our own cash registers, By establishing systems and rituals that support our good habits.
Precisely. You got it. Like, if you want to write more consistently, you could create a morning writing ritual.
A specific time and place.
Make your coffee, get your notebook, and just write. No distractions.
That's right.
And over time, that ritual becomes the cue to trigger the writing. It becomes automatic. You just do it.
That's awesome. I also like how Clear encourages us to use technology to our advantage too, right? Like automating bill payments or using those website blockers.
Oh, yeah, those are great.
Anything to make it easier to stick with those good habits.
Absolutely. Anything that removes friction.
But we're all human, right?
Yeah.
We're going to mess up. We're going to slip up. We're going to have those days when we just don't feel like doing what we know we should be doing.
We all have those days.
What do we do then?
Well, Clear reminds us that those setbacks are completely normal.
They're part of the process.
They are. It's not about being perfect. It's about progress.
It's about getting back on track.
Exactly. The key is not to get discouraged or beat yourself up about it, but to use those slip-ups as opportunities to learn.
Ask yourself, what happened there? Why did I get off track? And what can I do differently next time?
It's about having that growth mindset, you know?
Yeah, understanding that even the most successful people make mistakes. It's those mistakes that teach us valuable lessons.
They help us get better, refine our approach.
And make us more resilient in the long run.
Exactly. And this brings us back to one of the core themes of Atomic Habits, identity.
Right.
Remember how our habits shape our identity and our identity shapes our habits?
It's a constant loop.
It is. And if we want to make lasting changes, we have to start with our beliefs about who we are.
So if I see myself as a healthy person, I'm more likely to make healthy choices. If I see myself as a writer, I'm more likely to write consistently.
That's the idea. It's about aligning your actions with the person you want to become.
And it's not about pretending to be someone you're not, right? It's about tapping into your true potential.
It's about becoming the best version of yourself, the person you know you're capable of being.
This has been a really insightful deep dive. Atomic Habits is so much more than just another self-help book.
It's a guide to personal transformation. It's about building a life you're proud of, one small step at a time.
And it leaves us with this really powerful question to think about. What's one tiny change, one small habit you can start today that will make your future self proud?
It doesn't have to be anything huge,
Just one small step in the right direction.
Remember, it's all about consistency.
Those tiny, consistent actions, those atomic habits, that's where the real magic happens.